The Colts would go on to win their last 9 regular season games and win the AFC East with a record of 10-4. What did that get them? A first-round matchup in Pittsburgh against the defending Super Bowl champion Steelers. That went about as well for them as you would expect. The Steelers win it 28-10, and a couple of weeks later, they are Super Bowl champs for a second straight year. Jim O'Brien knows that team as well as anyone. He has written over 30 books in his long career in his Pittsburgh Proud series, many of them centered on that great Steelers dynasty of the 70s. I'll just give you just one for now. Franco, Rocky, and Friends. It pays to be a good guy. And joining us now is a really good guy, Mr. Jim O'Brien. Hey, Jim, how are you today?
I'm fine. And you mentioned Franco. Franco and I got to be good friends after he retired. And I spent a lot of time in his company. I probably did the longest interview that was ever done with Franco Harris. It was he was going to be a speaker at a dinner in Saskatchewan, Canada. And I went up on a private airplane, private jet with Franco. So I had his total attention for about 14 hours. And I talked to him the whole way. When we came back, my wife said, "Do you need a psychiatrist now, Franco?" And he laughed and he said, almost. He said, "I'm used to it now." But I had an opportunity to have a captive audience with one of the great football players and human beings of his time.
You know, we had, it just goes to show you his character. We had Phil Villapiano on earlier this year, and they, developed a great friendship because I believe they were both honored by the Italian chapter of sports in Pittsburgh, and they couldn't make it, but both sets of parents made it. And so their parents became friends. And through that, Phil and Franco became dear friends. And, you think of those teams as being, such hated rivals back then. But I just thought that spoke so well of both Phil and Franco.
Well, when I traveled with Franco, I always felt like he was looking after me. And he didn't take great pride in his interviews, but he was great. And he was just a little on the shy side. And like a lot of really great athletes, he frankly did not enjoy talking about himself.
Hey, Jim, let's talk about that playoff game against the Colts. Baltimore comes in, as I mentioned, having won 9 straight games. But the Steelers always had someone make a play. And in this case, it was Jack Ham. Tell us about that game and what you recall.
Well, Jack Ham was one of the great linebackers in NFL history. He had played his college ball at Penn State. The Steelers had 3 exceptional linebackers at that time, and the reserves weren't bad either. But they did have Jack Lambert at middle linebacker, and they had Jack Ham and Andy Russell as the other 2 linebackers. And one thing that they all shared in common was not only did they enjoy playing football, but they took pride in the way they represented themselves and their team. And I became friends with them after they finished playing and after I was no longer writing for a daily newspaper.
Late in that game, up 21-10, the Colts are on the 3-yard line trying to make a game of it, and Ham hits Bert Jones, forcing the ball loose. The aforementioned Andy Russell, who wrote the intro to the book I mentioned, Franco, Rocky, and Friends, scoops it up and starts going the other way. Ham has a great quote. He said of Russell, "He was running so slow, I didn't know if he was trying to score or trying to run out the clock." 93 yards later, touchdown, game over. You mentioned Andy Russell. We know about Lambert and Ham and Mean Joe, but this guy was kind of the underrated linchpin for that defense. Tell us about Andy Russell.
Well, Andy Russell was a super guy. He was in ROTC when he was in college at the University of Missouri, where he was a running back as well as being a linebacker. And Andy was a bright individual, and he knew he was a bright individual. And he had a good mind for being able to diagnose plays in action. He could read the other team's schemes and stuff like that. So he was exceptional, but he also, like I said, he played with two other outstanding linebackers, and one of the backup linebackers was Robin Cole, who could have started for a lot of teams. So they had an exceptional group of players. And Chuck Noll, the coach of the Steelers Super Bowl championship teams, liked having smart ball players on his team. He was more impressed with their football IQs than he was necessarily with the numbers on how high they could jump and how fast they could run 40 yards. But Russell was exceptional, and Andy. I just saw a picture of myself with Andy Russell and Art Rooney II, who was the son of the late owner of the Steelers, and Art Rooney Jr. Is still alive, and Russell was one of his favorites as well, and Russell has since passed on. So Andy was a sports writer's favorite. He always had time for sports writers. He wrote a couple books on his days with the Steelers and his time in the military service. He wasn't as well known for his military service as his teammate Rocky Bleier, whose days in the service were chronicled in a book and also in a
made-for-TV movie, right?
Yeah, right. For television. So, they made fun of Andy for how long it took him to score. They claimed that Andy Russell set an NFL record for the longest time-wise of a change of hands of the ball. But he was pretty sharp.
Jim, you're talking about that, about how Noel wanted intelligence on his defense. You had once called that Steelers defense a blend of brains and brutality. Was there a specific player that embodied that balance?
Well, strangely enough, Jack Lambert. Lambert, of course, is recognized for being such a fierce competitor and a mean football player, with the Dracula teeth and all that sort of thing. But he was also very, very smart as far as his recognition of the other team's schemes and so forth. And it's funny, guys get reputations for different reasons, but he was actually pretty smart. One of the ways that I remember him that points that up is the fact that when we were on the plane on road trips, he was always reading a book, and they weren't cowboy books. They were authentic novels and stuff like that, and he was very well read. So Lambert was kind of a surprise in that regard. And Lambert came out of Kent State, which was not a football power. And Chuck Noll personally visited the Kent State campus to see Lambert in action, and was quite impressed by what he saw.
I mean, obviously being impressed with Lambert. There was another guy back there that I loved and also had an interception in that game against the Colts. Tell me about Mel Blount.
Mel Blount, I just saw a commercial on television of Mel Blount visiting the Steelers Hall of Fame at Acrisure Stadium in Pittsburgh. And Mel Blount was one of my favorites because he was a attractive man. He was handsome, and he was bright-eyed, and he always had time for sports writers, and I took advantage of that because I could always count on Mel Blount for a good interview. The very first time I met Mel Blount was at the Steelers training camp at St. Vincent College in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, which is also known as the home of Mr. Rogers and Arnold Palmer. Arnold Palmer, the great carver. They were all from Latrobe. The thing I remember about that first training camp when I first met Mel, first of all, he was a very imposing figure. The first night I met him was in a dark hallway of the student dorm at St. Vincent College, and he was walking with Joe Green, Mean Joe Green. They were pretty close. And when I saw them, I was happy that they were both friendly fellows. Because they might have scared some other people seeing him in a dark hallway at night. But Mel Blount, at that camp, I remember this. They were having drills, and they were running some plays, the offense against the defense. And Mel Blount, who was an all-pro defensive back, on the very first time that he came in contact, or almost didn't come in contact, with an offensive back, he dove and got nothing but grass. And the next thing you know, the fellow who's carrying the ball, guy's name was Jack Delaplane. He was a reserve offensive back. Delaplane is juking back and forth, trying to find an opening after he got past the initial wave of defenders. And the next thing you know, Delaplane is tackled from behind. And the man who tackled him was Mel Blount, who had initially missed him when he was coming at him.
Wow.
And this was like the first scrimmage of camp. And Mel Blount had been in the Pro Bowl the year before. Steelers had won the Super Bowl. And I asked Blount, why did you get up off the ground and end up tackling the plane? And Blount's response was, I learned a long time ago that you don't accomplish anything by pounding your fist on the grass. And I said to myself, I'm going to like this guy. He's going to be quotable.
Yeah.
And he was.
Yeah.
And he came from the deep south, Louisiana in this case. And he always had good stories back on the family farm and everything. And he was definitely one of my favorites.
Was that 75 Steelers team? I know it's hard to separate all of the Super Bowl championship teams that the Steelers had, but was that 75 team maybe overall the best of all those Super Bowl title teams?
I'd have to check my books to get a better bearing on that question. You're talking about a team that won 4 Super Bowls over a 6-year span. they were definitely one of the great teams of all time. And every time I see a story done about the NFL draft, and to think that in 1 year they drafted in the first round, in the first day, they drafted Blunt, they drafted from Southern
Lambert?
Cal, Lynn Swan,
yeah.
Lynn Swan,
Stallworth
and
Fourth, yeah.
Stallworth,
and Webster.
and Mike Webster. Yeah, they drafted 5 future Hall of Famers in one draft.
And then Donnie Shell is a free agent, right?
Yes, yes.
Not too bad.
Well, the Steelers always had an edge in those years because one of their scouts was a fellow named Bill Nunn Jr. Now, his father had been the sports editor of the Pittsburgh Courier newspaper, which was the most popular black newspaper of its day. And he knew all the players in the predominantly black colleges. And that's how they got people like Donnie Shell. I mean, they just knew the players and they knew the coaches, which was even more important. They knew the coaches and had a better relationship with the black school, predominantly black schools, and scouted them. And Bill Nunn Jr. used to pick an all-black college All-America team, which they published in the Pittsburgh Courier. So they knew the players beforehand, and they also knew, like Joe Green was from North Texas State, and Mel Blount was from
Southern.
it wasn't Louisiana
Southern University
State.
and A&M College.
Okay.
So you just mentioned Mean Joe Green, and when people think of the Steel Curtain, he's the first name that comes up, even though there were so many Hall of Famers on that defense. What was it about Mean Joe Green that separated him? Why he was such a household name?
Well, first of all, he had that name, which was a catchy name, Mean Joe Green, which related to the mascot at his school. And Green was just such an imposing figure. He was also was a good-looking guy, and just seemed to be bigger than everybody else. So that's one of the reasons. And then, of course, when he was drafted, not too many people had heard of him except the pro scouts. And one of the Pittsburgh newspapers had the clever headline the day of the draft when he was the number 1 pick of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And the headline said, draft, Joe Green, Joe who? And he had to live that down, but he did in a hurry.
So back to the game against the Colts. You had just talked about him, Franco Harris. Not only did he score the first touchdown of the game, he ran for 153 yards. You mentioned about what a great man he was. What made him such a great man in the comp? What did you learn about him when you had that conversation on the 14-hour flight?
Well, I bet I had the longest interviews with Franco Harris of any sports writer in America. And Franco attracted a lot of attention from other cities, from the newspaper guys there, like Edwin Pope at the Miami Herald, and Furman Bisher at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. So he was an oft-interviewed player, and I just got a picture sent to me the other day of myself at a luncheon with Mel Blount as one of the other speakers, and it reminded me of what a wonderful relationship I had enjoyed with him for many years. He was a farm boy from a big family, and his mother must have been a wonderful woman, and she raised a large family of her own. And Mel, of course, was the centerpiece of that family. He just was, he still is. He still has a exceptional presence about himself. He grew up in Vidalia, Georgia, which is better known for its tomatoes, onions, sweet onions. And he used to talk about the sweet onions of Vidalia. But Mel still lives on a farm outside of Pittsburgh in a place called Blaisville. And he has a boys' home there. So he looks after these boys that are wayward kids that have gotten into difficulty of one kind or another while attending regular public schools. But Mel has an exceptional way with young people. He commands attention, and he has horses there on his ranch, and teaches the kids how to ride horses. Mel, I think this is still true. Mel competes in horse cutting contests at rodeos and so forth. And Mel loves to wear a big cowboy hat, which is his signature item in his wardrobe, the big cowboy hat. Nice man with a nice smile and well thought out answers to any questions one might pose for him. So Mel Blount's I had favorites in all sports, but Mel Blount was one of my favorites in football. And the Steelers had a lot of guys on the team who were good interviews.
So we do a trivia question in this show called 50-50. I'm going to give you a 50% chance of getting a trivia question right, and it's going to be about Pittsburgh and the Steelers. So my trivia question to you is that the Steelers have always been known as the Steelers since their very inception. True or false?
False.
And
They were first known as the Pittsburgh Pirates.
I figured you'd get that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they were known as the Pirates for a couple of years, and Art Rooney was a simple man in a lot of respects, and that was an example of it. You know, he didn't think beyond the team that he also followed in Pittsburgh, which was the Pittsburgh Pirates baseball team of the National League. But they had a contest in which 2 season tickets was the prize. The name or rename the football franchise, and I met the person who picked the winning name. He wasn't the only one to pick the Steelers, but he was the one that won the drawing for the tickets. And the tickets were right next to seats occupied normally by Billy Conn, the light heavyweight champion of boxing from Pittsburgh, who of course lost in a championship fight for the heavyweight title against Joe Louis.
We are speaking with Jim O'Brien. Go to jimobrien.com to see all the books he has written. It's like his own little wing at Amazon. He's written so much. Jim, the Steelers beat the Colts.
Those books are
Go ahead.
Books, by the way, are still available. I had a inventory of all 32 of the books that I've done. So anybody that wants information about them can look it up and get it autographed the way they want it autographed and so forth.
Wonderful. Great. The Steelers beat the Colts in that playoff game we were talking about. And up next, it's the Raiders in the AFC Championship game. The second of 3 times in a row those teams would meet for a right to go to the Super Bowl. The winner would win all 3 Super Bowls. The Steelers win Super Bowls 9 and 10. The Raiders win Super Bowl 11. They were the 2 best teams in the NFL, and they did not like each other. Tell me about this matchup and these 2 teams as a rivalry.
Well, the Raiders were owned by Al Davis. And Art Rooney Sr. may have been the only man in Pittsburgh who liked and spoke well of Al Davis. Chuck Noll never cared for Al Davis. And Noll had actually been on a staff with Al Davis with the original San Diego Chargers. But Noll didn't like Davis because Davis was a show-off and liked to let people know how smart he was in terms of picking good players. And he was. And I liked Al Davis because Al Davis was always available for an interview. And a sports writer could ask for no more cooperation than to have a guy return his calls and give some thought before answering questions about him or his team. So Al Davis was always one of my favorites among the players or coaches from other teams.
Okay, hold on for just a bit, Jim. He's not just an expert on the Steelers. Oh, no. You want to talk hoops from 50 years ago? Jim is the resident expert on that as well. We'll talk ABA with Jim O'Brien in just a bit.